Welcome back in Alive Now. I'm Austin Westfall. The UN's nuclear watchdog has reportedly been unable to inspect nuclear facilities in Iran affected by the war last June. The Associated Press saw a confidential report by the International Atomic Energy Agency, where the IAEA says that it, quote, cannot provide any information on the current size, composition, or whereabouts of the stockpile of enriched uranium in Iran, or whether Iran has suspended all enrichment-related activities. Let's bring in the FDD's Andrea Stricker. She is a nuclear non-proliferation expert at the FDD. You know, I was reading up on this because I knew we were going to talk tonight. I was reading that the IAEA says it can't do what's required under the safeguards agreement of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Andrea. So how often is the IAEA supposed to check up on sites like Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan?
Good to join you, Austin. You know, the IAEA designs safeguards so that it can detect the diversion of nuclear material within about a month. So they don't want that to go missing for too long. And in the case of Iran, they're likely in there inspecting more frequently than every month, particularly at the sites that would produce, you know, the 60% highly enriched uranium. But I think what this reporting underscores is the IAEA's frustration that it really has not been able to inspect any of these sites for close to a year now. And Iran has no legal grounds to restrict their access and to prevent the safeguarding of nuclear material. And so I think member states are getting very frustrated by this.
Yeah, does this treaty, this nuclear non-proliferation treaty, does it describe what is supposed to happen to a country if it doesn't fulfill its duties?
Well, really, the only recourse is to pass resolutions condemning the activity, the action, the lack of access at the IAEA's Board of Governors meetings. And then if the state does not comply, you can refer the matter to the UN Security Council to, impose sanctions. That hasn't worked out very well in the case of Iran. What's really bit them most is the oil sanctions that the US imposed over the years. And then, of course, since the military strikes, they have not been enriching uranium for the first time since 2006. Nonetheless, we still need the IAEA in there to verify the whereabouts of around 9,000 kilograms of the enriched uranium, not just the highly enriched uranium.
You know, you and I believe we were talking last year when the sites were struck in June, and there's been a lot of discussion about what's left underneath the rubble, if you will. If the IAEA were to inspect these areas, what level of clarity do we have on how they would carry something like that out? Isn't this material far, far underground?
It's an important question. The Fordow enrichment site, the Natanz enrichment site, they were hit with the massive ordnance penetrators, and Fordow itself is, very deeply buried under a mountain. The Isfahan tunnels, another site of concern, was hit with 30 Tomahawk missiles. So the IAEA just doesn't have the capability to do a job like that, because you're talking about moving in significant amounts of heavy machinery and excavation equipment, and also WMD and hazard material recovery teams. So, and President Trump, we've heard, has said that it's only the United States and China who have the capability to do something like that. So that's one reason why he's wanting the United States to supervise it. But I think he is willing to have the IAEA in there to oversee the whole thing. And also, he's even mentioned having the Iranians help out.
Which is an interesting idea. The war isn't as kinetic as it once was, Andrea, but it's still an unresolved conflict. President Trump has been giving us updates on social media every so often. We're kind of still in ceasefire limbo, if you will. Are there supposed to be safeguards for IAEA crews to go into these areas if it's believed to be dangerous? We don't know what exact direction this war is headed, after all.
That's right. And the U.S. and Israel, I believe, would notify the IAEA. I assume they did not strike the past two rounds with knowing that there were IAEA inspectors at the sites. So they would wait until they were on a day that they were not in there, or warn them ahead of time. But I think Iran also would have some limited time to kind of move inspectors out and say that they're under attack. We don't want you in here. What they don't have is the legal the legal wherewithal to say you can't come back for a year. So it's really, even though they're being hit militarily on 2 occasions, there is no legal mechanism to stop the IAEA from being able to be in there.
What's worth tracking in the coming days and in the coming weeks, other than, a big announcement from President Trump about the direction of the war? What are you watching for specifically about Iran's nuclear program?
Well, according to President Trump, the U.S. and Israel are watching these sites closely to make sure that Iran is not going in and recovering any of the material. It's my understanding that the Esfahan tunnel complex is the most questionable, that they might be able to reach the material if they so chose. He said even that he says 9 cameras on these sites. I assume he means satellites looking at these very closely, perhaps drones. But I will be looking to see whether the talks ultimately collapse over the ceasefire falling apart, but also Iran's refusal to commit to turning over the enriched uranium. So they have said that they're willing to turn it over, but they haven't been able to commit to that in this initial memorandum of understanding. And of course, we also want the IAEA to be back in there as a follow-on provision. And certainly that should be at the top of President Trump's list as well.
Appreciate the time. Thanks.